So let's talk about the exploration authenticity type, or the ENFP type in the Myers-Briggs system. This type is also sometimes called the champion. Now, before we really launch into this, I just want to make a note about who this webinar is for. I'll really be talking to three different kinds of people. The first kind of person is the ENFP themselves. So I'll be doing a lot of talking directly to those of you who are ENFPs. The second kind of person that this webinar is for are people who have ENFPs as friends and family members. So they're trying to get to know this type a little bit better. And the third kind of person I'll be talking to are the people who are just trying to get familiar with all of the 16 personality styles. So if I come in and out of pronouns, if I use you and they and we, that's because I'm talking to different types of people, but I will primarily be addressing the exploration authenticity style itself. So let's get right into it. As an overview, of all the types, ENFPs are the most energetic and inspirational. Even though other types may be quite influential, it's the ENFP that excels at creating excitement for a cause. So when they're at their best, ENFPs are on the leading edge of social consciousness. The distinctive style is producing interest through lots of positive energy. So ENFPs create interest and persuade through positive energy focused on a cause. But what can happen is that an ENFP that doesn't really have a specific cause themselves can get lost in a sea of them, and they'll have trouble knowing which cause that they should be crusading for. However, if they're at their best, they know where the cause is and they are totally directed for that. And people of this type, so those of you who are ENFPs, you'll probably recognize this, usually think of yourselves as intelligent and iconoclastic. So you're the rebels, you're the smart, cause-oriented rebels, and you develop unique habits and champion new ideas. You learn and teach through performance, and you generally sway other people to your side through artistic self-expression. So this is usually in like music, writing, filmmaking. There's a really big artistic component to this champion piece. And I just want to make a mention. It's really important to address that ENFPs learn and teach through performance. So this is really important for them to be able to feel free to not only express themselves, but learn and teach through this self-expression. So let's talk about who's in the car. Now, this is a companion piece to the PDF profile that you have, and you should be familiar with all of the different cognitive functions or mental processes that basically make up your personality type. But I want to break this down a little bit more so we can get more granular about what's going on inside your mind and what's really influencing your personality. So in the driver's seat is a process that is called exploration. Its technical term is extroverted intuition. So this is your driver or your flow state. What balances you out is what is in the co-pilot position, which is authenticity, or what is technically called introverted feeling. Now, directly behind the co-pilot or the navigator is a 10-year-old, which is the exact opposite of the co-pilot. So if the co-pilot is introverted feeling, its exact opposite is extroverted thinking, or also what's known as effectiveness. And then directly behind the driver is the 3-year-old of introverted sensing or memory. Now, what do these different positions do for you? How does this influence your personality? Well, in the driver's seat, exploration gives you an intense curiosity about the unexplored. Exploration loves to learn new information by being a maverick, right? I talk to a lot of exploration styles, and we basically have concluded that we're like the people with the machete standing in front of 6-foot tall grass. We love blazing trails. And I use the word we because I'm also an exploration driver, even though I'm not an ENFP. But I love this too, and I know lots of ENFPs who just love blazing new trails. And if there's a tiger in that 6-foot tall grass, tiger be damned. We're still going to go find and explore new territories and really push our boundaries. So this gives you a love of novelty and a love of learning new things through exploration. You basically see the world as a spider web of interconnected thoughts. So basically, this is your learning process. intuition is how you learn new information and understand it. And because it's extroverted, what you're basically doing is you're pattern recognizing by messing with your environment. And because you're messing with your environment and seeing all these patterns sort of emerge, you start to see how all these different components are connected to each other, even if other people miss them. So it's really easy for your brain to maybe take big leaps in logic and recognize how these two things, disparate pieces of information that other people might think have no relationship to each other, you realize how they're connected through the spider web of interconnected thoughts. I use the illustration of a spider web because it's kind of like a bunch of flies flying into a spider web at one time. The spider not only knows the location of each of those flies, but knows the relationship that each of those flies have with each other on the spider web, right? That's the sensitivity. And that's how you learn new information. A bunch of thoughts come flying at you, or a bunch of data and information comes flying at you. And you not only just see those little pieces of data, but you see how they're related to each other. And the exploration process kind of makes you a natural scientist. You experiment with the world, you experiment with words, you go out there and kind of push buttons, pull toggle switches, and you get new patterns that form because you're messing with your environment. You're willing to go to places that other people aren't willing to go to. So this turns the world into sort of a test iterate laboratory for you. And on some level, you're a natural scientist because you're willing to experiment and explore it. Now, this is your flow state. If you are not doing this often enough, you will become depressed. This is how you juice your batteries. So just remember, this is not a bad part of you if other people try to say it is, right? Other people might be a little intimidated by this part of who you are, or maybe a little fearful because it's like sort of the opposite of a safety orientation. But if you're not doing enough of this, and I mean, it could be as simple as trying new foods all the way up to world travel. If you're not doing enough of this, you will become depressed. However, it doesn't make you a complete person. This is how you interact with the outside world. It's extroverted. And it's how you understand and learn new information. It's your intuitive process. But to be a complete and whole person, you also need a way to interact with your inner world, and you need a way to make decisions or evaluate the information you're learning through your driver process. And that's what your authenticity navigator does for you. It's introverted feeling. So it's introverted, it goes inside and gets you in touch with your inner world. And it's a feeling process, which means that it's helping you evaluate information. So how does it do that? What does it do for you? Well, first of all, it makes you sympathetic to others. There's a phrase that the more personal something is, the more universal it is. And that is a concept that authenticity understands innately, inherently. It understands that if I'm having a deeply personal experience, I'm probably not the only one. Because this is kind of how people are, right? This is how people respond and react. So because you are so in touch with how things are impacting you on a personal level, you recognize how things are impacting other people, and this makes you sympathetic to them when you're really, really connected to this part of yourself. So even though exploration might be willing to push buttons, if you're using authenticity well, it's not willing to hurt other people in that process. This also gives you a gift of self-expression. Authenticity goes so deep that it oftentimes hits parts that don't have language. The only way to help express this or share this and be understood by other people is through mediums that are emotional, like music. So when we think of people who are very self-expressed, we think of people who are able to communicate their identity to others or their experience to others in a very poetic way. And ENFPs are naturally talented at this. They recognize that others will know who they are if they can perform it and replicate that emotion to the other person. So they are generally very gifted at self-expression. And here's a very important part that authenticity brings to you. Very, very, very key. Authenticity is how you get in touch with your core values. All right? That's where you find that inner alignment. When you get into that place that has core values and inner alignment, that's where you find your cause that must be championed. So most people of your type usually have a natural desire to want to be a champion of some sort. But the biggest problem they run into is they have so many different things that could be of interest to them, so many different things that they feel like they could do, that they get lost in this ocean of possibilities. And then they don't choose anything. And that makes them very unhappy, right? Because they want to be on a mission. They want to be doing something bigger. What authenticity does for you is it helps you evaluate your very specific criteria on what's important to you. So this is the piece you have to tap into if right now you're looking for your cause or mission. It's the authenticity part that tells you what's important to you. Okay, so that's the good news. Let's go to the backseat and talk about what might not be as good a news. Let's talk about the backseat drivers, or backseat passengers rather. So the 10-year-old position is the exact opposite of the co-pilot. And if the co-pilot is introverted feeling, then that 10-year-old is extroverted thinking or effectiveness. So this shows up for you when you are being defensive most of the time. Most of the time it shows up when you're being defensive. So the reason it shows up when you're being defensive, and I don't just mean like in an argument, when you're being defensive in an argument, I mean when the world is trying to give you pieces of information that you don't want to see. It could feel like an attack. It could feel like something that threatens something important, maybe hit your ego a little bit. And the reason why you go to effectiveness is authenticity requires you to go to a place that is deeply personal, right? And you might get in touch with a feeling or an emotion that is icky or doesn't feel good. So what will happen with people of this type is you will use exploration to form a pattern, right? You'll see something novel that other people don't see. But instead of asking yourself if this behavior is right, you'll go to effectiveness to say, okay, so I'm messing with the environment. What's the best way for me to get what I want out of the environment? So effectiveness is all about what works. And when people have it as a strength, they're usually pretty good at it, right? Do a lot of resource management and that sort of thing. But for you, it's just about getting what you want. So when you go to effectiveness, you can become manipulative, passive aggressive, or even a con artist to get what you want because you're so good at manipulating other people's emotions. And if you use authenticity just enough to manipulate an emotion, but then go into effectiveness to just try to get something for yourself, that's when you become a con artist. On the other side of this, even if you don't have, say, what could be defined as ill intent or selfish intent rather, not ill intent, but selfish intent, you might do the opposite. Because effectiveness is really good at resource management and because it's your 10-year-old, what tends to happen for people of your type is that you overcommit because you don't have great time management skills. It's really hard for you to determine, okay, how much energy do I have? How much, me time will I need? How many projects can I absorb? How much can I pile on my plate? And that's something that you're not naturally good at determining. So you might say yes to all sorts of opportunities because you're highly optimistic. And then once you get in there, realize you have massively overcommitted. And when that happens, you become overwhelmed. And generally, that effectiveness process gets really aggressive about it. It gets really angry, really aggressive, and tries to push its weight around just to get out of this situation. Okay, so that's on the bad side. But on the good side of the 10-year-old place, this is what gives you natural leadership skills. So you don't want to throw effectiveness out, all right? Effectiveness is a really important part of who you are. It's just you don't want to call upon it until you have pinned down that authenticity piece. So the way that it works for you is you build skill and development in exploration, which means that you pursue new novel concepts, ways of interacting. You use that optimistic what if thinking to try to make big changes in the world. Then you add the component of authenticity, which is all about what's important to you and what's a part of your true core values. And then once you've got those two pieces nailed down, then you can add the leadership quality that the effectiveness piece brings to you. Okay, let's talk about the 3-year-old memory, which is the exact opposite of exploration. Now, you go to the 3-year-old generally in a time of extreme stress. The reason you do this is that all of us, no matter what our type, generally experience the world through our driver process. It's the lens through which we experience almost everything. So if we're trying to solve a problem and we're trying to use that driver process, right, to solve it, and it's not happening and not happening and not happening, our driver will get overtaxed, almost like putting the pedal to the metal, but you're in neutral. So the engine over revs and doesn't really get anywhere. So eventually the driver just needs to chill, right? Just needs a break. And the brain goes, if we go to its opposite mental process, it'll shut down that process and give it some time to rest, which is an incredible mechanism. And it's amazing that the mind knows to do that. But unfortunately, when the mechanism is in control, it'll take you to a 3-year-old place where you are already stressed out, and now you're a 3-year-old that's stressed out. This will look like, basically, when you're really stressed, this will look like becoming highly fatalistic. Almost like you have no more options. You can't do any more what ifs. It's just going to be this way, and there's nothing you can do about it. Another way it can show itself, depending upon your different styles as an ENFP, is it can look like a fear of physical safety. Like, oh no, I'm going to get sick and I'm never going to recover. Or it's a fear around your safety in general. Like you have destroyed everything and you can't fix it anymore. It's fatalistic, and it's almost like death is coming when you get really stressed out. So, or maybe even considers death, right? Like as an option. So really watch out for this. It doesn't have to go down that way. What you can do instead is you can control the mechanism itself. When you get overtaxed, what you need to do is you need to thoughtfully go to this process, but in a way that is going to be healthy for you. And you can de-stress by revisiting pleasant memories through either media or your personal journals. Now, one way that you can do this is, and I'm an exploration driver too, I go back and I listen to music from when I was in high school. Or I watch a movie I've seen a million times. Or I start to read a book or a story that is one that I've loved forever. Alternatively, you can go back if you're a person who keeps journals, which I recommend you do for your authenticity process. Go back and read journals. Just kind of get out of the moment of what ifs, right? Get out of big picture thinking and zoom in on sort of a quiet, basically an identity through experience moment. And what that means is memory is very much about understanding who you are from where you came from, right? And so if you can go back to your journals and kind of go, this is where I was, ruminate over that, kind of recognize who you've become since then, that's a great way to give your exploration process a break. So your aspiration is generally found in your 3-year-old as well. Now, the reason why this is your aspiration is you spend time trying to solve a problem that everybody else would be using the memory process to solve, but you can't really use memory because it's your blind spot. So there's a lot of problems that end up surfacing that you've got to solve in a novel new way. That becomes your aspiration. And so for people of your type, that usually looks like creating a cultural legacy that lasts. Because memory is all about the infrastructure, the traditions and infrastructure and maintaining the world. That's how memory works. It's all about red tape and making sure that we have an infrastructure that will keep human beings going. You're normally all about the novel and new. But what ends up happening is when you create a brand new way of doing something, a new system, a new paradigm, etc., eventually that gets integrated into culture and that becomes the new normal, right? So what you can do as an aspiration for memory is create a cultural legacy that becomes the new normal. It becomes part of the infrastructure, and it will last because it's got that infrastructural component behind it. All right, let's talk about your type in relationships. ENFPs generally connect with others through a sense of adventure and romantic optimism. Things are never dull with an ENFP. So what is romantic optimism? Well, people of your type have a tendency to be very idealistic and very optimistic. And you're very romantic at the same time. So when you engage in a relationship, you see the person as wonderful, you've got rose-colored glasses, everything in life is very romantic, and everything's going to be great. And you want to have a sense of adventure. So if you choose the right mate, this is a wonderful combination because, everything is beautiful, wonderful, romantic, like you basically teach through performance. And so you express your love, right? You teach the other person how much you love them through action, activity, and performance. And it's actually a wonderful thing. And your type is extremely inspiring, provocative, and influential. Amazing charisma, right? Your type has extraordinary charisma and can be very provocative, extremely. People are just drawn to you like crazy and inspired. If you use your talents for good, people can get really inspired to, to join your cause when you are on mission. On the flip side, if you're using too much effectiveness, you can be emotionally deceptive, using your natural charisma to manipulate and control to get your own way. Now, of course, the antidote is to get up into authenticity, but one of the best ways to truly practice authenticity is to be honest, right? To be honest with other people. Instead of people pleasing and going around and trying to manipulate and find loopholes to get what you want, and sort of emotionally manipulating the other person to give you what you want, tell them. Be straight up honest and tell them what you want. Listen when they tell you what they want, and then find a mutual solution. Find a win-win. There's a sense of moral flexibility that people of your type can have, and you want to avoid that moral flexibility for self-serving reasons. Now, this is not all of the people of your type, but it is common for people of your type to be financially reckless, spending what you don't have to feed your need for novelty. So if this is the case with you, if you're identifying with that, set up an accountability partner for financial, like a financial accountability partner or a financial advisor, and this will keep you from catastrophe. It's okay to indulge in the finer things of life. It's okay to spend money that you have, but it's not okay to spend money you don't have and potentially put your family in a bad situation. So curb it at the beginning. It's okay if you admit this, right? We're talking about all ENFPs, so you're not the only one, right? Now, when I say all, I don't mean every single last ENFP. There are a couple that are actually very good with their finances. But on average, most people who are exploration authenticity are not great at basically saving or using their money wisely. So if you're one of those, set up an accountability partner. Set up a way to make it so that you won't put your family in a bad situation. And again, you're very social and you've got lots of positive energy. So if you get in a relationship with an introvert, the introvert really enjoys being around people of your type generally. Now, you might be a little more energy than they can handle, but then at the same time, you get them out, you get them into social situations that they otherwise wouldn't have been in, and it's just a big party. And the same thing if you're with another extrovert. It's very adventurous, very idealistic. There's lots of fun there. You just have to keep your finger on the pulse of not going to excess, and just have somebody be watching, say, the money, the time, all those resources that you might not want to have to think about. All right, let's talk about your type in business. Makes sense. Your type prefers a career that has a social cause behind it. And you really are at your best when you're working with people. Now, you don't have to be working with people. You can be working on something that's creative and inventive. You can be working on something that, may not have direct relationship with people, but is still new and has a lot of high energy going with it. But you are at your best when you're interacting with others. So if you're in a context where you're trying to determine what career to go to, or if you're trying to figure out what the best job for you is, or if you have an ENFP as an employee, make sure that there is some social component there, because that's where they really excel. And of course, you like change and you like to experiment. If you are in a situation where you have to do the same old every day, you are likely to jump ship. Now, what ends up happening with people of your type is you are the best employee ever for like 3 to 6 months. And the second you learn the job, all of a sudden you become the worst employee, or at least a C player. And the reason why is during the learning phase, it was exciting, right? And you were great and you were learning like crazy. But as soon as the learning ends, you lose interest. So make sure that you are in a career or a job that has a lot of change, a lot of experimentation, that you are always learning on the job and you're not just doing the same thing over and over. And you're better at selling it than planning it. That makes sense, right? So your get things going style is really well paired with a chart the course style. Somebody who takes care of the long range planning and all those details. So the power pair for an ENFP, the best pair is an INFJ. Those two are a power pair with each other. You do have a habit of ignoring the rules. So the benefit is that people of this type can cut through red tape and make a lot of creative leaps, right? You find leverage points, you find loopholes, but the drawback is that they can attract trouble to an organization. So if you employ an ENFP, kind of be watching for this. They're not great at the details. They are usually looking for a loophole because all the details just drive them crazy. So don't give them too much detail-oriented routine task. But it is great because they're very creative at finding new and novel ways to do something and actually, save you time and money. For the most part, most ENFPs have learned which rules they can break, but you still want to keep your finger on the pulse of this and make sure that they're not breaking rules that could be catastrophic. Makes sense. People of your type have little interest in conventional jobs. So if it's too laborious, if it's machine driven, generally you're going to have to rely on somebody else to provide that piece. And details are best left to someone else. So once the deal is closed, hand the paperwork off, right? ENFPs will say, once I've got somebody interested, once I've done the initial attraction phase, and once I've closed the deal, now I don't even want to look at it anymore. I just want to go to the next, which of course makes them great deal makers, great salesmen, great marketers, etc. So just make sure that somebody else is catching those details, because if it's up to the ENFP, there will be a lot of balls that are dropped. ENFPs perform better in areas where people skills and creativity are valued over technical skill or detail management. Let's talk about best practices for this type. Exercise the authenticity process. It is so important to focus on developing that co-pilot or that navigator process. And this is so that you can communicate your needs diplomatically with others. So remember that your 3-year-old of memory is the most common strength. All right. So what that means is more people are using memory as a driver or co-pilot than any other type, and by far. So people will probably not understand your aversion to it. They won't get that you want novelty. They won't get that you hate doing things the same way. And they won't get that you need new experiences all the time. But that doesn't mean you have to cave under the pressure to be like them. So stick to your guns of needing to do things novel, new ways, but communicate these needs diplomatically and don't just become a manipulator. Also, use authenticity to guide you towards your mission and goals. If you avoid that inner you, all right, if you avoid that co-pilot of authenticity, if you don't have your finger on the pulse of your core values, you will get lost in a sea of options. Let that authenticity piece, let that authentic nature direct your activity and stop overcommitting, which you'll do. If you don't know what you want to do, then everything will sound good, right? You'll see all these possibilities. You'll start chasing all these possibilities. Everything will look great. And then you will be massively overcommitted. So let that authentic nature direct you so you are not overcommitting and you are not spinning your wheels. You'll make sure that all of your focus is directed towards something that's truly important to you. Watch out for burnout, all right? That overcommitting piece, it's a big one for people of your type. So watch out for burnout and stress. If you don't take deliberate, relaxing downtime, you are likely to take unscheduled, depressed downtime, all right? So be conscious of you getting your needs met. You can go like crazy. You have lots of energy, but if you don't take that me time, your body won't lie to you. It will catch up with that, and it will force you to take downtime. But now you'll be depressed, and it might come at a really awkward moment. Learning to let go is the key to ENFP happiness. As the Tao Te Ching says, the master, seeing that nothing needs doing, leaves nothing undone. So what does that mean? It means if you're not attached to everything, if you're not attached to your outcomes, if you let go, then now you can come to your tasks with some freedom, right? It won't feel like you're bound and chained to them. You won't be neglecting duties because you're upset or resentful that you have to do them. You are directed on a path that means something to you, and then all of your tasks and duties will be something that you want to do, and you'll do them well. So thank you very much for joining me on the Exploration Authenticity webinar. And just as a note to people of your type, all of those who are ENFPs that are listening, I just want you to know how amazing you are and how important it is that you bring your gifts to the world. There's not very many people of your type out there, and you bring something that is so important. You help us question our values. You help us question the things that other people would never even consider questioning. You make sure that we are changing to catch up with new morality and new values. And that means we don't go stagnant. That means that we really truly consider our ethical place. And it means that we are persuaded to not just stay stagnant in our positions, but actually see what is possible and make sure that we're going out for what the next thing is. This is part of what keeps us evolving. And this is what helps us keep awesome as a human race. So thank you so much for what you do, and make sure you're bringing your gifts to the world because we desperately need it.